What's happening, Fourth and Inches Fantasy Football family? We just want to make a quick announcement. We are now Cheat Code Sports. Yes, we are Cheat Code Sports Fantasy Football Podcast. So if you guys see the change, which I'm sure you have or you will, we are Cheat Code Sports Fantasy Football now, not Fourth and Inches Fantasy Football any longer. So you can go on the website at www.cheatcodesports.com and get all of our same information that we always put out, just a different looking website a little bit, because of the name change. So www.cheatcodesports.com. That's www.cheatcodesports, cheatcodesports.com. And let's get to the show. What's going on, Cheat Code Sports Fantasy Football listeners? We got Stevie P today. We are going to be going over some news, some trades, some things that have happened in the NFL that we are all aware of at this point and that make a difference for a lot of teams. Tom Brady going to the Buccaneers and David Johnson going to the Houston Texans and DeAndre Hopkins going to the Cardinals. There's a lot of guys that have moved spaces in places, and you know what? We're going to talk about it. So let's hit up some of these guys that have moved. I think we have to start off with Tom Brady, right? That's like probably the biggest one other than DeAndre Hopkins. But honestly, Tom Brady has been the pillar of the Patriots organization for the past 20 years. So to me, he's the most guy that people want to talk about. He's the biggest news in sports really at this point. Everybody knows what's going on with this coronavirus, and to everyone affected and to everyone that has it and that everyone that is quarantining themselves or at home, I hope we give you a little bit of a release from what goes on to your daily life. But that's really all we're really going to say about it. Not going to get too in depth with the coronavirus stuff. You can literally turn on your news or television and there's nothing but coronavirus talk everywhere. So, we're not going to bore you with the coronavirus talk. We are going to take your mind off it as much as possible. So let's get into this Tom Brady. So looking at what the Buccaneers did, bringing in Tom Brady makes a whole lot of sense. Jameis Winston really killed them last year with his 30 plus turnovers. It's a team that really, if you looked at it, without all those turnovers, they probably win a lot more of those games that they were in because they played well. And the defense played well. The offense played relatively well with a quarterback who just kept giving the ball to the other team over and over and over and over again. So when you think about that aspect of what happened to the Buccaneers last year, and you think about some of the games that they lost by a touchdown or less, you really start to think to yourself, what could this team have been without 30 plus turnovers from their quarterback? It's a team that, to me, coached by Bruce Arians, has the ability to make a playoff run. I don't know about a Super Bowl run, with Tom Brady, we'll see. But, they definitely last year were supremely hindered by the play of Jameis Winston. So with Tom Brady being in the mix, I could definitely see a scenario that the Buccaneers are very much improved, a lot more than people may think. A lot of people probably think Tom Brady's washed up and Tom Brady is old and blah, blah, blah. But if you watch Tom Brady play last year, he didn't look washed up to me. I know he had a lot of errant throws that we're not used to seeing, but to me, that was just more the wide receivers not being able to get open. There was a lot of situations where Tom Brady was throwing the ball to guys and then just completely going berserk, yelling at them why they didn't do this or why they didn't do that. And to me, that is a big issue with why the Patriots were the way they were last year and why Tom Brady, looked the way he did. He didn't see any less zip on the ball. I don't think he's a less of a quarterback than he has been in previous seasons. Obviously his arm strength, a lot of people question it, but he completed the second most passes downfield in the league. Only second, not even second. It basically tied Jameis Winston. He did. He tied Jameis Winston for the most completions of 20 plus yards. So Tom Brady's never been like this, chuck the ball 60 yards downfield for touchdowns other than, the Randy Moss years. So I don't know what people are expecting from a 42-year-old quarterback, saying that he lost arm strength, because he's never been this guy who has had supreme arm strength to begin with. So to me, questioning his arm strength and all that stuff, what does that even mean? Like, if you're sitting there going, oh, Tom Brady's not the same quarterback because his arm strength isn't the same, we just don't watch the same game. That's basically all I can say. This is not a guy that we thought was going to throw, 60-yard bombs 4 or 5 times a game. That's not Tom Brady's game, and that's not what the Patriots game is. The Patriots want to, beat you by moving the ball up the field, wasting clock, getting their defense out there to make you, to make stops and outscore you 21-17 or, 21-14. That's the games they kind of want to win. The Patriots are not over there trying to score 80 points. It's not the Randy Moss years where they were scoring 31 a game. That's not what the Patriots are. You know what I mean? The Patriots defense held them in a lot of games. So, to me, looking at Tom Brady last year, watching his play, watching every one of his games, I don't see this huge drop-off that everybody else sees. I don't see it. Do I think that his coming to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers makes this team an instant playoff team? I do. Do I think it makes the wide receivers more relevant than they were last year? I don't. I do not think that, Mike Evans and, the crew is, I don't think it makes them that much better. Chris Godwin last year basically was a top, what was he, a top 8 wide receiver in the league. I don't think that's going to be a number that goes up with Tom Brady. Jameis Winston with his 30-plus turnovers, he also got to remember he threw for 30-plus touchdowns and over 5,100 yards. So I don't think Tom Brady throws for 5,100 yards and, a lot less turnovers. Yeah, definitely. But, could I see Tom Brady throwing 30 touchdowns? Yeah. But do I see 5,100 yards? No. Because I don't think they're going to have to throw the ball as much as they did last year. I think the defense is good enough to make stops. I don't think Tom Brady's going to turn the ball over 30 times. And I don't think they're going to have to be throwing the ball as much as they are. Don't get me wrong. In the Bruce Arians system, he's going to throw the ball because that's what Bruce Arians does. But he's not going to have to throw the ball 40 times a game. It's not what he's going to do. They're going to score points. They're going to hope the defense makes stops. And they're going to play good football like Tom Brady always does. You know what I mean? That's the case, and that's the situation that the Buccaneers are in right now. So if you're going into this season thinking Tom Brady is going to be this outrageously great fantasy quarterback, don't get me wrong, I do think he's a top 10. I would put him in my top 10, top 12, probably in that range, 9 to 12. But I don't see a Jameis Winston season minus 20 turnovers, I think a lot of people are expecting that. I think a lot of people are expecting, 4,800 yards and 35 touchdowns. And is that possible? Yeah, that's possible, but highly unlikely, really highly unlikely. So, to me, I think this team got better, much better. I think this team is definitely a playoff team, just considering what they had last year and, what they are this year. I definitely see that they could do something, if they get in the draft a couple of guys that can help out this offense, such as a running back, maybe some offensive linemen to give Tom Brady a little more time and to open up some lanes for the running backs to do their thing. I think this is going to be a really good team. I think this could be a good fantasy team. This is, we already know what Bruce Arians can do with an offense. So, good team? Yes, definitely. No doubt. But, I think to expect the wide receivers to be so much better than they were last year, and, I think you're asking for a lot. I like those guys, and I do think that they are both top 12 wide receivers because of their talent. But, I think you're asking for a little bit much if you think Tom Brady is going to be the guy that puts those guys into the top, makes 2 top 5 wide receivers, and something like we saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple of years back. I just don't see that as a scenario that would happen, and I don't see that as a feasible scenario in fantasy football. I think a lot of people are thinking that, and I just don't agree with that assessment. I think they're a good team. I think they're a team that's going to put up a lot of yards and points, but not as much as they did last year. So a little bit of a drop off from the wide receivers from what they did last year is possible. I think that's kind of what you have to look at this point. So that's basically it for the Buccaneers. Let's get into this DeAndre Hopkins swap with David Johnson. I'm going to take it on both angles, okay? I'm not going to go, and say that this trade was fair, this trade was unfair, because guess what? I'm a fantasy guy. You know what I mean? I'm a fantasy analyst. I'm a guy that's going to tell you what I think the fantasy aspect of this trade is. You know what I mean? I'm not going to sit here and tell you if the trade was fair. You got some guys talking about if it was fair, or, how DeAndre Hopkins, had got basically was a steal for the Cardinals, and, the Houston Texans got raped. Yeah, guess what? I don't really care. I don't care about the draft capital that was spent to get him, or, not spent to get him. For the fantasy purposes, I believe DeAndre Hopkins is a top 3 wide receiver in football, period. Top 3 fantasy wide receiver. And I think that the Arizona Cardinals got a steal. You know what I mean? And a guy that is able to do a lot of things on the field. If you watch DeAndre Hopkins play, he's not the fastest guy, he's not the biggest guy, he's not the strongest guy, but the damn dude is tough. He catches the ball in traffic. He's always open. He always seems to be running crisp routes. If you watch some of his routes, he makes cornerbacks look silly a lot of the times. He makes a cut. He does a stop and go. He does, he just knows how to get open, which is really going to help Kyler Murray, because Kyler Murray had a whole lot of issues with wide receivers getting open. Larry Fitzgerald is in year 7,000, and Christian Kirk just is not there at the ability of, a top flight guy. I think Christian Kirk has a lot of room to grow, and I really think Larry Fitz being there, and I really think DeAndre Hopkins being there, learning from both of those guys, he could really take his game to the next level if he puts in the time and the work. But as far as it goes with DeAndre Hopkins, do I think this makes him so much better? I have a hard time saying this makes him much better than he was last year, or the year before that, or the year before that. I just think that in this air raid system that Cliff Kingsbury, uses, he gets the ball out of Kyler Murray's hands quickly. He throws the ball to an array of receivers. He's not stuck on one guy. He's not throwing the ball over and over and over to Larry Fitzgerald. He's not throwing the ball over and over and over to Christian Kirk. He's kind of just spreading the ball evenly, getting the ball out of his hands quick, getting the offense moving, trying to get first downs, trying to do things in a I don't want to say a hyper sense of moving, because a lot of people were saying, they're going to be like the Eagles were under Chip Kelly, where they move the ball quickly and they're running in plays and they're doing, this hyper active offense that is going to just blow up the league and blah, blah, blah. That didn't really happen last year. They definitely had a tempo about them, but I didn't see, the wild and crazy Chip Kelly offense that they're throwing in plays. They're not letting guys get breaks. They're trying to tire the defense. That's not what really was happening last year. And part of that was due to the 3 and outs. They were having a lot of 3 and outs last year. They ranked 22nd in the league in 3 and out percentage. So it's not like they were getting first downs, at a clip that was just crazy. So maybe with a better wide receiving core, and maybe with, Kenyon Drake being the go-to guy day one, not splitting carries with David Johnson, which he kind of really didn't, a little bit towards, the middle of the season, whatever. But, he was basically the guy, and with this offense, I do think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to, be able to move the ball a little bit better, be able to get first downs with DeAndre Hopkins. Main reason why they brought him in, he's a first down getter. I mean, the dude just knows how to get open. He's able to get first downs. With the Houston Texans, he was great at that. Whenever they needed a first down, guess what they were looking at? They were looking at DeAndre Hopkins because that's what worked. You know what I mean? So I do think that this offense has the ability to continue to progress. I do think that DeAndre Hopkins is a big force, on this team, but I don't know if DeAndre Hopkins' numbers are going to be what we have come to expect. Do I think he's going to be a top 3 guy? I think that he could be, depending on the progression of Kyler Murray, but my best guess would probably be a top 7 guy, just because Kyler is still learning, still taking things in. So, there is that maturation process that has to happen between those two. It's not going to be a day one that they're just a perfect connection. It's not the way the NFL works. It's normally not why wide receivers who get traded are actually ever good. If you look at the track record of wide receivers that have moved from team to team, they just don't seem to work out right away. Randy Moss is really one of the only players that I can think of that, switched teams and immediately was just amazing. Tom Brady and Randy Moss just immediately had a connection. So that's rare to find when you look at wide receivers who were traded. Amari Cooper, you could say he had, a pretty good connection with Dak Prescott in the beginning, but I didn't think it was anything crazy. Amari Cooper had a lot of just mediocre games, and then he had a couple of games where he blew up. It's kind of his MO. So, even that connection, I don't think was like, oh my God, it's amazing. So I don't think this connection is going to be amazing right off the bat as they progress, throwing the ball to each other and, just kind of getting that rapport of the timing and things like that. Yeah, I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be very good. So I could definitely see him finishing in the top 7. But taking him as a top 3 guy is something that's going to, is going to worry me just a little bit this season. In Dynasty, I would definitely, he's a top 3 guy in Dynasty, top 3 wide receiver for me in Dynasty, because I think he's still going to be good for the next 5 years at least. But in, just redraft leagues, I'm not taking him as a top 2, 3 wide receiver. I just, for me, that's a little high, and I think that's where he's going to go. And, I'm more than happy passing on DeAndre Hopkins for, other wide receivers. On the David Johnson side of this trade, okay, so David Johnson, I don't think he was ever a fit for what Cliff Kingsbury was planning on doing. David Johnson is, he's a really good receiver out of the backfield. He, I think, is a very good running back, but it just didn't seem to work with the way Cliff wanted to run the offense. I don't know if maybe, David Johnson, after missing a full season with the, wrist injury and then coming back, the next season and kind of being just pounded into the offensive line, not really having any blocking at all, because the Arizona Cardinals offensive line was not a great run blocking team, even with Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake kind of had a couple of good, really, really good games, but then he had a couple of games where he didn't really do a whole lot either. So I don't think David Johnson is completely spent the way people are saying he is. It definitely slowed down, I would say, from what he was 3 years ago. But, I don't think he's a terrible running back by any means. And I do think in this Texans offense, he could be another guy that has a resurgence. I think, I don't think you can take him as a number 1 running back now, but as a number 2, yeah, I think he could have a bounce back season and possibly be at the low end, number 1 range at the end of the season. I think the Texans do want to run the ball. I think the Texans do want to establish David Johnson. They traded for him. They traded DeAndre Hopkins for him. So, I do think that he is going to get a whole lot of run. And if you are taking David Johnson, I don't think you have to be worried about his touches, because I do think he's the man there. I don't think there's a split backfield by any stretch of the imagination. But, in the same breath, I think that, David Johnson is a guy that we're going to have to see how he gels in this offense, how they use him, what they do. So in the beginning, he could start off slow, or he could start off really fast because they decide to just give him the ball a lot. I mean, you got to remember, they lost a huge piece in the passing game. They could want to say, you know what, we are going to establish the run and then play off of that with the play action pass game. That's kind of what I think the reason they did this whole thing. I don't think that, this makes the team terrible. And there's a lot of wide receivers in this draft. I think if there was a year 2 trade DeAndre Hopkins and then go draft, 2 or 3 wide receivers out of a draft class, this is the year to do that. If you're going to trade a big piece and then say, you know what, we have the 20-something pick. I think they have the 24th or whatever it is, 23rd pick. This is the year to me, I think, to do that. I think this is the year to, trade that big piece, start drafting some young wide receivers to bring onto this team and let them grow with a very young, good, Watson. To me, I think this is a team that could gel and be a very good team. And David Johnson could, especially in the beginning of the season, be, that guy that gets a whole lot of touches, and they kind of build the offense. They're not taking, Watson is not going to be like second fiddle to David Johnson. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I do think David Johnson is a focal point in this offense to begin the season. So, I could see David Johnson having a bounce back season, having a good season, being a top, 15 guy. Definitely. I know he's probably not going to be drafted. He might be drafted in that area, maybe a little bit later. I've seen him, I've done some dynasty drafts, and I do think, some startup dynasty drafts, and I've seen him going, as maybe like the 13th through 17th, running back taken. So there is guys, that are willing to take him, right outside the top 12 running backs. And there's guys that are just, I'm going to wait and let somebody else take him. So I do think that he is a bounce back season. And, if he does, then that's great for fantasy because, the more fantasy relevant running backs that have opportunities to become, top 15 guys is great. We want guys fighting for that position because running back is a scarce position. We all know this. So, a guy that I like. All right, continuing on. All right, so let's talk about this Phillip Rivers trade. Well, Phillip Rivers signing with the Colts. Okay, so for me, Phillip Rivers going to the Colts is actually a great news for, the Colts skill position players. I don't know if Phil Rivers is going to be better than he was with the Chargers. The LA Chargers were a team last year that, Phillip Rivers didn't look good in a lot of games, especially towards the end of the season. But, there's no way that he could possibly even a little bit look as terrible as Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett looked, in the first couple of games, he didn't look bad. I want to say the first 6 to 7 games of the season, he didn't look bad. He held the team, he did what he had to do, but after that point, he just had game after game after game of just mediocre play, and just it was clear and evident that the Colts needed to do something at the quarterback position. Do I think Phillip Rivers is a million times better than Jacoby Brissett? I wouldn't say that. And Phillip Rivers just, let's be honest, he was a turnover monster at the end of the season last year. I don't know if he had an injury issue or what the case may be. He's never been a guy that does that. He does have games where he implodes, sometimes, but nothing like we saw at the end of last season. So Phillip Rivers is a guy that I do like, but for me, more than wanting to draft Phillip Rivers, it's the skill position guys on this Colts team that I think get a boost. I think that they're probably going to go definitely wide receiver in the draft. I could see them making their offensive line is great, so they're definitely going to go defense in the draft. They're going to do some things to try to liven up this offense. And because of Phillip Rivers, I'm going to be buying on guys like T.Y. Hilton and Jack Doyle and Even Mo Alley Cox as a, deep tight end, if I'm in a deep league, is a guy that I think I might take a look at. Marlon Mack is going to be a guy that, is going to go in the top 15, 16 running backs being taken, and then you got to see what they're going to do with, wide receivers like Zach Pascal, if he's going to still be, a starter on the team, or, if they're going to try to figure out some other offensive weapons that they can use. Nyheim Hines was a guy that a lot of people liked last year. And honestly, with Phillip Rivers, if you remember what he did last year, it was a situation where Melvin Gordon held out and Austin Eckler was their pass catching running back. And, he caught a lot of balls last year. He definitely saw a lot of passes from Phillip Rivers. So do I think that they can acclimate Nyheim Hines into this offense with a Phillip Rivers who likes to throw the ball to the, running back position? Yeah, I think Nyheim Hines could definitely get a big boost this year. And I know last year he was a lot of people's darling. A lot of people, were saying late round guy to take that could definitely blow up is Nyheim Hines. So I could definitely see with, Phillip Rivers coming in there, liking to throw the ball to the running back position. I can see Nyheim Hines being definitely a guy that they use in this offense and take some, of the load away from Marlon Mack. And Phillip Rivers could come onto this team and make a lot of the guys relevant. Do I think Phillip Rivers himself becomes a top 12 guy? No. I think that Phillip Rivers is probably, in the 15 range, 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there is where I think Phillip Rivers will probably end up. But that's kind of where he was last year, so I don't think he's going to have a drop off. I don't think he's going to have a big boost with coming to the Colts. Honestly, I think, like I said, the Colts skill position players all become a lot better with Phillip Rivers on the team, and that's why I like Phillip Rivers going to the Colts. So, next player we are going to talk about is good old Teddy Bridgewater. One of my favorite stories coming out of, the past couple of years was, Teddy Bridgewater getting hurt the way he did. I know a lot of you football fans will remember how graphic a lot of the, Minnesota Vikings players said that his injury was and how terrible, you had guys thrown up on the field, guys crying because of, just how gruesome that injury was. And Teddy has come back strong. Teddy has really looked good last year. He wasn't the reason the Saints were winning games, but, he was definitely not the reason that they lost any games because they didn't while he played. He was winning games with the Saints. And I think going to this Carolina Panthers team, he's not going to turn the ball over a whole lot. Kyle Allen just was, he had some games where you were like, oh, he could be something. And then he had other games where he was just like, oh my God, this guy is terrible. But, Teddy is not going to be that. Teddy is going to be a guy that takes care of the ball. He's going to be able to get first downs. He's going to be able to move the ball. And I think this was a great signing for the Panthers. If you're not going to bring back Cam Newton, which they obviously decided they were not going to do, I don't know if that's due to his injury. Obviously it's due to his injury, but I don't know if that's due to the injury making him look worse to them as a team, or if they were just like, it's time to move on from Cam. Ownership might have said, hey, listen, this guy's always hurt. We need to do something. And that's what they did. But, Teddy Bridgewater is a guy that I think is going to be able to help out this Panthers team, much more than Kyle Allen did last year, because Kyle Allen to me is not a starting NFL caliber quarterback. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is just that. I think he's in the 28 to 32 range of starting quarterbacks. And really, with the way starting quarterback is now, he's probably in the top 24 range of starting quarterbacks. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's terrible. I think he's just good enough to take this team a lot further than Kyle Allen could possibly ever take this team. So, from a fantasy perspective, I think that he makes this team a little bit better at every position, but not a guy that I will be drafting for fantasy purposes. I will not be starting Teddy Bridgewater as my starting quarterback. In a 2 QB league, obviously he's a guy that you're going to be taking, but in every other league, I'm probably going to be avoiding, in 1 quarterback leagues, I will not have Teddy Bridgewater probably on any team. Sticking with the Carolina Panthers, Robbie Anderson goes to the Panthers. Robbie Anderson is a little bit of an enigma. He really is. There's been a couple of years where you're like, oh my God, this guy is going to be so good. And he just starts the year off terrible. And last year, I don't like to say I told you so, but we kind of told you guys. His schedule to start off the season was atrocious. He had one of the toughest schedules to start off a season. He was a guy that we were all like, oh man, you might want to avoid Robbie Anderson until about week 8 or 9. And that's basically when he started playing well. And he didn't really have a consistent well streak. He kind of had a game where he blew up, and then the next game he didn't do nothing, and then the next game he blew up again, and then the next game he didn't do anything. So, it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride with Robbie Anderson, and a lot of people dropped him after like week 6, 7. For most fantasy players, were dropping Robbie Anderson, and for good reason. He just wasn't contributing to your team. So if he's not going to be contributing to your team, it's kind of hard to hold on to a guy that really did nothing up until like week 9, I think it was. So, it with the Carolina Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater, I do think has the arm strength to take some deep shots, but I just don't think Robbie is going to be consistent enough for you to be taking, as your wide receiver 3. He is a guy that, is kind of like a Deshaun Jackson, a guy that with the right matchup, you can throw in there and be confident that he's going to get you, a long touchdown. But other than that, Robbie Anderson is a guy that I'm probably avoiding because I just don't like drafting. I just don't like drafting those guys that, have the possibility of getting me a 80-yard touchdown and then just not doing absolutely anything else the rest of the game. To me, I'd rather have the guy that has 6 catches and 40 yards with no touchdown than pray that Robbie Anderson gets me, a long bomb touchdown. But, a lot of people like to play like that, and, more power to you. Robbie Anderson is now a Carolina Panther. The next guy I want to talk about, Austin Hooper. So Austin Hooper goes to the Browns. Not probably not my favorite destination for Hooper. He gets a $42 million 4-year deal, which obviously is why he went to the Browns. But to me, not a fantasy move that I really like. I think Austin Hooper has the possibility of, doing a little something maybe with the Browns, but not probably a tight end that I'm going to be taking. I just don't see him having, Baker Mayfield. Like, what has you watched with Baker Mayfield that makes you think that he's going to throw the ball to the tight end a whole lot? Because he hasn't done it yet. There hasn't been, David Njoku, we were, a lot of people were just like, oh my God, he's so good, and he's just a freak, and he's fast, and he catches, and he does everything you want in a high-end tight end. And did you guys see anything out of Baker Mayfield to make you think that he, wanted to target David Njoku a lot? Because I haven't. So maybe Austin Hooper goes in there and gets in his ear and says, hey, listen, I had an amazing season last year before I got hurt. I can do the same thing here. I'll be your outlet. Maybe. But I just don't see it. I don't see a tight end that I'm going to be super excited to go get. If you get Austin Hooper later, much later, the 10th, tight end taken off the board, then I'm kind of okay with that. But to take him before that, I think is, a stretch. I really just makes me nervous thinking, oh yeah, I really, really need to go get, Austin Hooper, who's going to be playing with the Browns this year. Just not a guy that I'm super excited about. Brashad Perryman, going to the Jets. Brashad Perryman basically got taken by the Jets because they lost, Robbie Anderson. They needed a guy who could stretch the field, and Brashad Perryman looked, good towards the end of last season. He stretched the field for Jameis Winston when they basically lost their 2 best receivers in Godwin and Mike Evans. And he did his thing towards the end of last season. So he definitely gave himself the opportunity to, have an $8 million contract for 1 year, because before last year, he wasn't worth that even close. So, it's a 1-year deal saying, hey, you're 26 years old. Let's do this. Show me what you got. And Brashad Perriman has that chance. So, I want to take Brashad Perriman? As my number 4 wide receiver, yeah, I would take a chance on him just to see, what happens. Maybe he becomes the go-to guy, on a Jets team that, maybe gets a little bit better this year. They do some things in the offensive line to try to make the offensive line much better because the offensive line was terrible last season. The Jets' offensive line was one of the worst in the league. So if they can improve that offensive line and give that team a chance, even for a second, Le'Veon Bell could be better, and it just could be a better team with an ascending star in Sam Darnold. Maybe Sam Darnold takes the next step. I think he is a very good quarterback. I think he has the capability of being a very good NFL quarterback. And, let's see if he that maturation process takes hold and, he starts to become a much better quarterback than what we've seen so far. We don't want to see any more I see ghost games, obviously. But, hey, I think this Jets team could be much improved as long as they decide that, they're going to fix this offensive line and they're going to play good defense because they do have a good defense, and they're going to let Sam Darnold, wing it when he has to. So, let's see what happens with that team. All right, so the next guy I want to talk about is Emmanuel Sanders. Okay, so Emmanuel Sanders is going to be 33 this year. I believe he is 33 now. So an older wide receiver going to a Saints team with Drew Brees. I like it. I like it a lot. If I'm being honest, I think this actually makes this team so much better because they have not had a number 2 wide receiver in a very long time on the Saints. They've had Marcus Colston and they've had, Michael Thomas, and really no number 2 wide receiver to speak of with either of those guys. Jimmy Graham was a great tight end, but he wasn't a receiver. He played more like a receiver, but he wasn't the number 2 wide receiver. They haven't had a number 2 wide receiver, on this team in a long time. Cook is on the team, which gives them a tight end threat. Now they have Michael Thomas and they have Emmanuel Sanders, and they have, a great running game. They have a, very good, team overall, and I could definitely see this team being something special. Emmanuel Sanders, to me, with a healthy Drew Brees all year long, could be, a number 3 wide receiver for you that puts up points, every week for you, consistent points, because I think Drew Brees is going to be able to get him the ball. He gets open. He's a guy that has the ability to, make big plays and be a contributor for this team that I think is going to be very good this year. So I do like the, Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints signing. I think that is one that, we're all going to enjoy. Eric Ebron is a guy that I think some people, I don't know, they see him going to the Steelers and maybe they say, oh, Big Ben throwing to him could be a good thing. No, Big Ben don't like to throw to the tight end. Honestly, the most productive tight end that he's ever had is Heath Miller. And Heath Miller was not a very productive fantasy football tight end. So not a guy that I'm really going to draft at all. Eric Ebron, is a guy that, because of his, 13 touchdown season 2 years ago, people are going to take a chance on. I won't be one of those people. I'm just going to stay clear of that and not really worry about, a Steelers tight end, period. That's just not a position that I'm ever going to look at, especially with Big Ben throwing the ball there. That's just, no thanks. All right, so, alrighty, the next guy we're going to talk about, Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon going to the Denver Broncos. Head scratching a little bit? Yes. Oh, man, this was a guy that I was hoping landed with a more, high-powered offense, I would say. And he went to a team that already has a pretty good running back. So it's a situation where Melvin Gordon is going to be the 1A on that team to Philip Lindsay's 1B. Honestly, I think, both of them get similar touches. I don't think Melvin Gordon out-touches Philip Lindsay by a million touches by the end of the season, maybe 50, 60 at the end of the season. But it kind of eats into both of them because I do think that they like Philip Lindsay as a player, and I do think they're going to use him a lot. So it's a little bit puzzling, why they did this, honestly. John Elway, I don't know what the hell John Elway was thinking, honestly. I think that this is one of those, free agent signings that you're going to scratch your head about, and you're going to have to see what the hell they do with these two, because we don't know what the situation is, who's going to get more touches. Obviously, we know that Gordon's probably going to get more touches, but you can't say that with 100% fact. I don't think they would sign him unless he was going to be. So he's probably going to be the guy who gets more touches, but a lot more touches, I find that hard to believe with the way Phillip Lindsay has played in his first couple of seasons. So, I like Melvin Gordon as a player, but I don't like the landing spot, and I think it's going to be a little bit hard to figure out what's going on in this backfield. There's really not a whole lot more on the free agency side. The last person in free agency that I really want to hit on is Todd Gurley. I've saved, for me, my favorite signing for last. And you guys know how I felt about Todd Gurley last year. I thought Todd Gurley was being a little bit blackballed in leagues by fantasy analysts. And if you got Todd Gurley in the middle to late second round last year, like most people did, he was not bad. He was a number 2 running back, and that's what he put up last year. He was a number 2 guy. He scored a lot of touchdowns. Let's be honest. That offensive line was horrible. Nate Sudfeld showed how important he was to that team last year. That Titans team was awesome running the ball last year. It's just coincidence that Nate Sudfeld now plays for the Tennessee Titans. Let's be honest here. We are not, looking at a washed up Todd Gurley. I don't care what anybody says. I watched every single game, every single snap of Todd Gurley's last year, and Todd Gurley did not look washed up to me. Todd Gurley looked like he was on a horrendously blocked offensive team. He just had no holes, and some of the holes that he was hitting, he squirted through and got 6 yards. He squirted through and got, 8 yards, but it was far and few between. The dude was getting hit at the line of scrimmage like over and over and over again. It was almost like beating a dead horse watching him run the football last year, because he just had no holes to do anything. And they basically, because they wanted to limit his touches, basically said, you know what? We're just not going to throw the ball to him at all. And that's what they did. They did not give him anything in the passing game. He literally just ran the ball. Very, very far and few between was he catching passes for that team last year. And I don't think that's going to be the case with the Falcons this year. I think the Falcons are going to use him in every aspect of the game. Because guess what? They don't have anybody else. They ain't got nobody else to run the ball there. You know what I mean? That team is barren of running backs other than Todd Gurley. So to me, Todd Gurley is a guy that I'm going to be taking as a top, I would say, back end number 1 wide receiver. I would be comfortable taking Todd Gurley at 12, as the 12th running back taken. I said wide receiver. As the 12th running back taken, 10th, maybe even 11, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. Just depends on, how I'm feeling when the season starts. We'll see, what they're saying about Todd Gurley as the season gets closer. But to me, if they use him, in the Devontae Freeman role, I'm all over Todd Gurley this year. I love that situation. A guy who's going back to Georgia. You know what I mean? That's the narrative. He's going back to Georgia. So let's see what Todd Gurley can do on this team. I think Todd Gurley is a guy that I am going to definitely go after. Some people may not agree. Some people are going to say he's washed up and he's not Todd Gurley and he's not the guy that, put up this and, he's probably only 70% Todd Gurley and blah, 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 blah. But listen, that's not what I saw last year, and like I said, I watched every snap. So I like Todd Gurley this year. I am going to be super heavy on Todd and, I may be wrong, but guess what? On that offense, the way they can move the ball, and they have Julio still, and they have a lot of pieces on that team to make that team very, very good. This is a team that could score 28 a game, 30 a game, and I want the running back on a team that scores 28 to 30 a game. That's plain and simple. He's going to be catching the ball out of the backfield. He's going to be running the ball out of the backfield. Arthur Blank has already said that, he's super excited to have Todd Gurley on his team. And when the owner tells you he's excited to have a player on a team, that to me, that's a guy that's going to get used a whole lot. So I like Todd Gurley this year, and if I'm wrong, I'm gonna go down with the Todd Gurley ship because I am going to be singing his praises all off season. You're going to hear me say that Todd Gurley is definitely a guy that I'm taking in a lot of drafts. I've taken him. I've been in 3 dynasty rookie draft startups, and I've taken him in every single one of them. So a guy that I like, and if he proves that he is healthy and he plays well, guess what? They're going to re-sign him. He's going to be there for a while on a team that I love this offense. So let's see how that ends up. So for us here at Cheat Code Sports Fantasy Football, that's the end of the show, guys. We love yous. Like we told you, be safe, be smart, stay home if you possibly can. If you're an essential worker, a medical worker, anything like that, we have so much love for you. And we pray for you guys that are out there, doing the essential work. As some of you guys know, Kev is a postal worker, so Kev is out there every single day still. I work for New Jersey Transit, so I'm out there. Dan, unfortunately, is a business owner who was forced to shut down. So, we are feeling the pain and, of this coronavirus just like everybody else. And we just want to tell you guys we love yous and we want you to stay safe and keep your family safe. Just do what you got to do to, get through a tough situation. And we thank you guys for listening, and peace out.